next presentation, political effectiveness. You can be interested in it, you can try and reach out to your people, but how do you actually, make things happen and get through it? So our next guest is Adam Weinberg. Adam is the Communications and Outreach Director for the Platte Institute for Economic Research. They're an Omaha-based think tank that studies state and local economic issues here in Nebraska and provide policy recommendations to increase quality of life and opportunity through the state. Ladies and gentlemen, please help us in welcoming Adam Weinberg.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sean. Thank you to the WeVote Project for having me here today. My name is Adam Weinberg. As Sean said, I'm the Communications and Outreach Director for the Platte Institute for Economic Research. I can hear back here that perhaps with the mic situation, I'll go to this level. How's that doing for you? Okay, great. And hi to everybody who's listening on the stream or watching on the stream. I think it's very important that since we're talking so much about hashtag type technology today, that we also talk about some of the lesser regarded forms of technology that are very important to those of us who want to be effective and be engaged in the public policy process. And as you think about different types of technology that you use in your day-to-day life, you might be talking about your PC, you might be talking about your smartphone, but I want to talk about a more fundamental level of technology today. I want to talk about technology that may not even be thought of as technology because it happens in an instant of the day-to-day that we're doing. For instance, today is a nice cold day. You probably all use this technology known as fire at some point in today's events. You may have used it in the gas lines at your home. You may have used it in the combustion engine of your vehicle to heat you along the way. And so I want to talk about some of the other forms of political technology that you'll want to use as part of your tactics to strengthen your involvement in using the computer type technology that we use now in our social media. So just a little bit about me, just to get things started, where I'm coming from. Of course, I work at the Platte Institute. We're a free market think tank based in Omaha, and we do research on policy issues and economic problems here in Nebraska and offer solutions to increase quality of life. And would encourage you to go to the Platte Institute website at PlatteInstitute.org, check out our studies. We'd love to hear back from you and try to be accessible through our own social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and whatever else might come along. I'm pretty new to Nebraska. I brought my family out here about 1 year ago, and we came from California, and so we're enjoying the weather. My family's from Michigan originally, so I knew what I was getting into. My wife is from Brazil, so she thinks the snow is magical and wonderful, and she's enjoying it. And the reason I brought my family out really is, and the reason I'm so committed to being involved in an organization like the Platte Institute is, I was not able to achieve the quality of life for my family that I wanted to in California. It was very hard, I found, with the policies there for families to stay in the middle class, to get into the middle class. And I wanted to be able to provide more for my family, be able to do better things for them. And so far, we're having a great time here. And as I talked to people over the years in Nebraska, I had seen that they were just happy with this place, and that that the good life really meant something to them. And so even though I don't have a lot of history here, it was something that really influenced my decision to come here and to be part of providing a good quality of life for people in this state. And so that's why I'm here and why I'm involved. My background before getting involved at the Platte Institute, I worked with organizing grassroots activists in California and in other places where I lived before. I also have a media experience and background, did some radio, also worked in the movie business in California, which is a whole other story of my life and affects a lot of the ways I look at production and organizing people and how many hours you put into a day as well. And so with that, I want to give you a sense of some of the political technology that we have here at our disposal. And once again, as I said in the intro, I really want to divide up the kinds of things we're saying when we say technology, because we're accustomed to thinking them as just tools. But really, I want you to also think of tactics that you could be using to improve your effectiveness as an activist, as a leader, as the founder of a nonprofit or a student organization, or what have you. These things that we're talking about here, recruiting, leadership, fundraising, mobilization, these are forms of technology as well. The way you engage with people to get the most out of those interactions and invest those interactions back into building a bigger movement for the causes you care about. And so I want to talk not only about maybe a little how we leverage these tools into using these tactics, but also how to make these tactics more effective. And of course, in the short time we have here for lunchtime, I won't be able to go over all of that, but I think it's important that activists look beyond just the slacktivism of posting a status or getting in fights on comment sections and ask, what are we building toward here? So there's two key goals with using political technology that I think activists or aspiring leaders have to look toward, and that's numbers and effectiveness. One of the key things that the We Vote Project is trying to help activists overcome is the fact that you're just on your own here. How do you make a difference when it's just you? How do you rally more people to your cause? So the numbers are very important because you need to be able to incorporate more people into active movements and organizations to influence policy outcomes. But I want to say that even more important than numbers is the number of effective activists that you have involved in your organization. Because if we look at just a poll or a question of how do people feel about issue X, Y, or Z, I think there are a number of issues wherever we come down on our beliefs and philosophy where we'd say that we feel that most people feel this way, but the public policy outcome is not what we think most people feel it should be. And that is in large part because the people who feel that that is what should the policy be and the outcome that it becomes, those are the people who are effectively engaged in those causes. So you can be with the public pulse all you want, but if you don't use the effective political technology to be able to be where you need to be in the process, then you're not making the effective difference. So effectiveness, if I have 10 effective activists, I would much rather that than 100 people who are just going to read my emails. And I think it's very important to be able to strive toward that effectiveness. So the use of political technology determines the number of effective activists on a given side. And when I say given side, especially here in Nebraska where we have a nonpartisan unicameral legislature, I think it's important to know that side doesn't necessarily mean Democrat or Republican, especially when we get down into individual public policy issues. If you look at an issue that was hot in the news this week with the Keystone XL pipeline, there might be a Democrat-Republican national news narrative of this party feels this way and that party feels that way. But when you get down into the coalitions that make up these parties, you had labor groups and environmental groups at different ends of the spectrum. A lot of people may not realize you also had groups that are considered right of center, where you had business groups and property rights activists against each other on that issue as well. So when we're talking about sides, it's not as simple as just putting it into parties and being able to identify really who could be on your side in a public policy issue and how you manage a coalition. The other thing that's really neat about this is that political technology is philosophically neutral. The techniques that you use to build an issue coalition, you can learn from anybody. And I think this is where when you take advice about how you should strategize or how you should communicate or what is really the best message to take on, or the people who are involved in your campaign or coalition, I think it's good to study from folks who you don't necessarily philosophically agree with and see what they're doing right. And that is, to my mind, something where you can make an honest personal assessment of your movement and also see, if there's a great idea that somebody you don't agree with is using, maybe it could be used in an effective way to advance your own causes that you do care about. So I think studying from all movements, I think people who are interested in politics who are right of center, they might learn from Joe Trippi, who managed Howard Dean's campaign, or folks who are interested from left of center, they might study the works of Morton C. Blackwell, who was an activist and organizer. And so there's a lot of different places where you can get your influence and read books or read from sources that give you a motivation for moving your movement forward. I apologize that this slide looks like it got a little messed up in the transition, but I want to talk a little bit about the economics of why the activist is at a disadvantage. And so I thought, let's just say that there is a political controversy in the issue of the Acme Corporation, which, as you know, makes wonderful anvils and TNT and dynamite and things like that. They want to get a government contract. It could be at the county, at the city, at the state. They would like a contract for $5 million to be able to produce some more anvils and sell them to the government. And perhaps you are an activist who just doesn't think that the taxpayers need more anvils, unless, of course, it's to drop them on the political leaders who are trying to advocate for it. Well, the reason the lobbyists for the Acme Corporation have more efficacy than you do as an individual is because there's a very clear cost and benefit analysis that you can place on here. If the Acme Corporation wants to put $5 million, or wants to achieve a $5 million contract here, and they have to make this investment here in green in order to achieve that, that's pretty straightforward for them. That's worth the time, talent, and resources to be able to go out and seek that. But if you're the taxpayer, this is just your little sliver right here, the cost, right? It's dispersed at the end of the day. And so your ability to organize other people to get up in arms about the fact that Acme wants to buy these, set up this contract, it can be very difficult. So your use of political technology by gathering other people together into real-world institutions after you're able to engage them on Facebook or social media of other kinds or at public events, which I'm really excited to suggest is the next logical step, This is an opportunity for you to be able to overcome this, financial and logistic disadvantage that you have going up against a professional institution that wants to use the levers of government to get the policy outcomes that they're looking for. So I hope this would point out that, maybe we don't need more anvils right now, and so it's not a matter of just your philosophy being correct. It's about the methods that you use to go about engaging in the public policy process. And this is where a lot of beginning activists start out, is they say, I am right, and therefore everything should go the way that I want it to, because people will recognize the virtue and the correctness of my position. And even if some people do, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to engage those folks in the process to make the outcome you want. Because the reality is, the folks who are in the process, they may or may not understand the issue as well as you, or they may not be as philosophically versed as you are, but they do understand their process generally better than you do. And so whether it's the structure of a legislative committee, or whether it's the resources to organize enough people to get out and make the media narrative reflect the public demand for a policy that they support or oppose. These are all things that are important to understand so that you can engage with not only leaders but community members about the outcome that they can stand to make by getting engaged. Okay, so we're back to these tools and tactics that we want to use to compete. And so I want to talk now, just kind of a rundown of a quick list of things where we've talked about slacktivism and technology use and some of the pitfalls of using these new media technologies and ways maybe you can be more effective in using them to get to the next step. Because what I really want to encourage people to use is using these technology forms to get people out into the real world. And that's not going to be everybody, but by using them consistently and effectively, you can get a greater number of returns. So one of the problems with an organization that wants to get started, or a group of activists who want to get started, is they're aiming toward using online content with the belief that if they can just get this piece of content out there, it's going to go viral, people are going to feel very outraged about it, and it's going to go all over the internet, and it's going to be on the nightly news. And the truth is, that's not the experience of most organizations that use online content. I'm not saying that you can't achieve that. I would love for you to be able to achieve that, but you have to have the right content at the right timing. Most people who use new media and social media to engage the public, it's actually a really long process of regular, meaningful interactions and building an audience so that when you do have that great content, you have a wider network of people from which to spread it. Depending on that as the success metric, or just how many people sign up as the success metric, that is not necessarily a realistic outcome. You want to look at building an audience over a long period of time. And that means, frankly, getting off the internet sometimes and going out to public events and sharing with people what you're doing and how there's a social media channel to be able to engage with that. So just depending on people to go onto your Facebook page or your Twitter page, and that's going to be instant success. It doesn't work that way for most of us. Some people are very fortunate and they have circumstances or content which enables it, but it's very important to have regular, meaningful engagement with your audience, build that audience, find out what they're interested in, ask questions, meet people, and you will, if you run social media channels, you'll get to find out who your regulars are. Thanking your regulars and giving them, a chance to interact with you is very valuable too, and they'll share it with other people who want to get involved. Once again, spending too much time online and believing that is, where you need, especially at the beginning of an organization, where you need to be spending most of your time. I think that there's a real cost benefit problem there, where people think that if they're starting an activist group that this is the first place that they need to go. I think going to community events, meeting with like-minded organizations, coming together to find out who your initial stakeholders are for creating a new public policy initiative, that's very valuable. And then you can use that social media content that you have to bolster that effort as well. So I always advise not spending too much time arguing on comment sections when you could be out building a bigger movement. The other thing is that I notice that organizations sometimes do is not having a strategy for content. If you have your organization or cause be about everything, it's about nothing. And that is because you need to identify really what is in your realm of possibility to be able to do in a given period of time and make that the focus. And so if your social media becomes all over the map, where you're not speaking to a specific audience, where you're not speaking to a specific issue on which you have, I'd almost liken it to a story arc. Where you're trying to go, what's your rising action, and what are you trying to build toward. So really try to think about, what are the maybe it's the one thing that you do, or maybe it's 2 or 3 things, but try not to make it 10 or 12 things that you're always talking about in building a coalition. And if it is, maybe you need to create different social media channels to do that, because if I'm trying to organize people to talk about taxes, and I suddenly want to talk about, some other social issue that's very controversial, I might have a lot of people who agree with me on taxes, but they don't want to talk about X, Y, or Z. And so you have to be careful about how you create those coalitions and what kind of content you want to put out. So focus your message and content. Use good judgment in what you put out there, because once you put it out there, even if you take it down later, somebody could find it. And it's great that when you put content online now, there is traditional media that will sometimes want to engage with you. And I encourage you to use your social media to engage with the traditional media and meet reporters and meet folks who are out there sharing content on a daily basis, and find out what they're doing. And when you see good work that they're doing, share it with your followers. But when you put content out there, you have to make sure that it's of the quality that you would want it to end up on the front page of the newspaper. And I don't just mean that in the terms of the quality of grammar or writing or anything like that, but just making sure that the message that you're articulating is the kind that represents your campaign or cause, and represents you and the people who work with you in a positive light. In general, but that means sitting down before you create this content online and thinking, what is my message that I'm trying to communicate to people? What are the ideas that I really want to get across? Not only what I want people to know, but what people really need to know. Because most people don't care about all of the details that we care about. They care about the big picture. And so thinking about what are the 2 or 3 main themes of my public policy coalition that I'm creating, and make that the regular focus of all of the content that you put out there. And part of that focus is that there's going to be regular opposition and objection to what you're trying to advance. And not all objection is opposition. Some objection are from people who are your coalition members who just want to know how a policy works better, or they have feedback for you about how it impacts their day-to-day life. And so you have to be prepared with kind of a menu of answers so that you can be able to engage with people in a meaningful way about the public policy issues that you want to advance. But perhaps most important, leading to all of this, why am I describing the public policy that I want to advance? Why am I assuring people that it works this way and not that way, or this is how it affects them in their daily life? Because I want to be able to use these as recruiting tools. I want to identify, recruit, and train people, and then place them in an effort so that they can be effective for the cause that I want. Because if they agree with me and they like me on Facebook, that may be nice, but a lot of people would say that's a vanity metric, because yes, I can go around and say, X number of people like me on Facebook, but what did they do? Did they communicate with their legislators? Did they show up to a public event? Did they sign a petition for a ballot initiative? So all of these communications have to be styled toward making a call to action. If you send out an email, perhaps that should include several references to how you need funds to do the campaign that you want to do. Perhaps it should include, when you do a Facebook post, a petition or an opportunity to join a mailing list, or something that builds the coalition that you're trying to continue to grow. So ultimately, if there was only one message I wanted to get out of this talk, it was that the technology should be a starting place. It should be a tool to lead to tactics that lead to outcomes that help your public policy effort engage in the real world. And that's not going to be everybody who's going to do that. And that can be frustrating, because there are a lot of people who you will agree with philosophically who are still going to not lift a finger to help you with the things you want. And that can really be draining. It can be really frustrating that that there are folks out there who say they want X, Y, or Z policy, and not everybody can do it. But it's really about finding those needles in a haystack, folks who want to become leaders in a cause, or feel, frankly, marginalized and want an opportunity to express how they can make a difference, and giving them the leadership chance to do that, and giving them opportunities in an organization. So when you build these organizations, ultimately, it's going to come down to confrontation. That is how policy change occurs. Nothing moves unless it's pushed. Somebody has set up in an environment where they have made decisions already, or they are inclined to make a certain decision, and if not for your intervention with your campaign or public policy institution or campaign or coalition, rather, it's not going to change, right? So policy change does require confrontation. Not all confrontation needs to be negative, but it does need to be clear. You need to be able to make a distinction with what your policy change offers, and to have the numbers and effectiveness to be able to do it. So I think it's always important, to be able to train your activists to understand that ultimately, if they want to make the outcome, it's not just about educating and changing minds. It is about engaging in an environment where they will have the opportunity to confront the policymakers that they disagree with and offer an alternative, and hopefully the numbers as well that can show that that alternative is the wise choice. So once again, identifying specific policy goals for your coalition I think is very valuable, because even in a coalition where people agree on the broad theme, they might not agree on the details. And so being very specific with your coalition members about what you're there to do is important. Not everybody who signed up for a policy is signed up for the same reasons. And they might not have a philosophical reason. It might be a practical reason. It might be the way that affects their business. So making sure that those things are specific is very important. And once again, as I've talked about, just using the technology to launch real-world institutions. Don't leave it to just sit on the internet. Go out and create something new that can be a social enterprise or be a nonprofit or a permanent infrastructure that you can use to build toward public policy goals that you care about, so that you can use that to identify, recruit, and train more people for the kinds of causes that you care about. So that's in general what I would recommend as a good use of technology, both the traditional technologies that maybe we don't think about and the new technologies that are in front of us every day. But I'd love, with the few minutes we have, to take any questions you might have about organizing activists. I've had some good days and some bad days, and would be pleased to take your questions. Yes, sir.
What sort of action steps do you recommend are the most effective, or that you find are the easiest for people to take that next step and execute?
I think it depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about, the grandmother who likes sharing your Facebook posts, but she might not be able to do much else, maybe it is sharing a piece of content or inviting people to do something, or sharing an email or joining a mailing list or something like that. Or maybe it is donating funds to a cause, because there are a lot of people who want to make a difference with their money, but they may be too old to go knock on doors, or they may not feel that they're the person to go out and do that. And so I think it's always proposing and showing to people that by engaging in this coalition, they can make the difference that they can't make with whatever resource they have, whether it's time, and all you have is time. Well, we've got something for you to do. And so I think that's the important thing, is to always have something for people to do. And if that thing for them to do is to be able to organize the interior of an office to be able to be ready for the rest of a campaign, maybe that's something you do on day one and then get them ready for something else. So I think it's finding out what resource they have that they have to give that would maximize your campaign, and then offering them a chance to advance that cause by doing it. Yes, Mr. Nelson.
Adam, we're gathered here today to talk about one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that the Nebraska Unicameral has been operating virtually the same way for 82 years. What conclusions has the Platte Institute drawn as to how we, the citizens, can get the legislative body to change its 19th century rules dealing with the public?
It's an excellent question, and it's something I'm still learning, only having gone through one session. But I think the main thing is that we need more leaders at the community level in Nebraska, because it seems to me on many of the important public policy issues, and this is whether you're left or right or don't know, it seems that there's a cast of characters that is consistent. And I think there need to be more people from the community level who want to be involved and want to show up, and not just hang out on the internet, but want to show up and build new institutions for Nebraska. And so if you have an issue that you care about, where you want to engage the legislature and change it, and this is one thing that I think is great about the We Vote project, I think it's really about the entrepreneurship to create new movements in our state. And the tools are there. For instance, the ballot initiative process has been used very recently, and that may be something that gets used again if people are not satisfied with the way the legislature is doing its job or is open to the public. So I think that's another venue as well. Does that get to the spirit of it?
Close.
Well, I'll keep trying. Anybody? Anything? Well, I really want to thank you for having me out here today. Look forward